When observing role-playing games created in Japan, it's pertinent to note that the common themes present within the narratives are one of comrades sticking together to save the world. Budding friendships, romance, the flame of hope that burns within the breasts of the characters that desperately struggle to protect the values that bind the fantastical worlds that they inhabit. How then would a game be presented that occurred in our world? Is it possible to give meaning to the existence of lives that may seem mundane when compared to the epics that we've come to know and love? The answer lies in magical realism, and in today's game, Koudelka. Developed by Sacnoth and published in Japan by SNK and worldwide by Infrogrames between 1999 and 2000, Koudelka places us into an old monastery located atop the blustery cliffs of Aberystwyth, Wales, in a world that seems foreign yet also distantly familiar. Now, let's set the mood. Close your eyes. Listen to the sound of the waves as they gently lap against the craggy shore. The cry of circling gulls echoing across the grassy knolls. The cold, serene stones of the monastery welcome you as brass gates swing inward, revealing an expansive courtyard framed by candlelit windows that wink at you with twinkling glimmers and a promise of respite against the icy fingers of Lady Frost. The hymn of monks at prayer reverberates across the stone facade of the exteriors of the buildings, creeping moss doing nothing to absorb the penetrating chant. Calm. You take a step forward. Koudelka?
I'm sorry, whose game is this?
Oh, right. We are placed into the shoes of the titular protagonist, a gypsy woman hailing from Western Europe who had recently arrived at the Nemington Monastery, a location of storied history that she is being called to by a woman's voice that penetrates her dreams. After an unceremonious entry, not that much unlike a thief, she meets a dying man who warns her of his current predicament, which he must deal with before she can take him to heaven. Before Koudelka has the time to puzzle out what he means, she is battered aside by a large monster that has its gaze set upon the dying man. Missing his shot, the man tosses Koudelka his pistol, and the first battle of the game begins. After the dust settles, as thanks, Koudelka heals Edward's injuries with magic, immediately establishing the literary genre of magical realism, which excited me as it's not often explored in role-playing games in comparison to the numerous high fantasy or hybrid sci-fi titles that we often tend to see coming from Japan. Despite the amicable nature of Koudelka's act of kindness, unlike contemporaries of the time, the game sees its protagonists at a constant war of words due to a gaping polar disparity that exists between each of their beliefs and faith. Regardless, they cannot leave Nemington Monastery, so must put those differences aside in order to progress and survive. In total there are 3 characters, including Koudelka, and they couldn't be any more different if they tried. First, let's examine Koudelka, a headstrong woman who has honed her emotions and powers based on years of alienation and isolation due to her ability of clairvoyance. Often her words are barbed with sarcasm, though despite this, deep down she does grow to care about the others. Edward is a typical treasure hunter, a complete romanticist, often quoting passages from classic literature or poetry. If he sees someone in trouble, he will rush to their aid, as can be observed in his encounters with Charlotte. Finally, James is the oldest of our characters, and also a member of the Catholic Church, based in the Vatican. He often preaches about God and believes that those that don't follow the faith are beneath him, and at first refuses to believe that the Nemington caretakers could be complicit in vile acts that defile the sacred grounds of the monastery. Due to his beliefs, he is constantly at odds with both Koudelka and Edward, often leaning heavily into his learned scriptures, then thinking logically to determine his course and actions. With the characters almost constantly being at odds, it sometimes feels difficult to believe that they could even be working together. However, when you consider the monstrosities they face, it's possible to suspend that disbelief and realize that they have no other choice. Though as they continue to push through the ruins, they eventually grow to respect each other, if a little begrudgingly. What I enjoyed most about the game was its realistic setting. Based in the late 1800s, the game references real-world events and locations parallel to our own world with the added existence of magic and the extremely macabre. I found exploring the old monastery interesting, encountering the various horrors, sometimes using spells to dispatch them, which grounded the narrative for me a little more than what a high fantasy based narrative could have done. That edge of the blade that is horror cuts a little deeper into the flesh of the imagination when you consider that these events could be real, in a similar vein to how Parasite Eve makes you feel whilst playing it, or how watching a zombie flick makes you feel if you stop to consider the repercussions of such an apocalypse occurring. If you enjoyed Parasite Eve, then you are going to be in for a real treat. Exploration of the grounds is done in a similar fashion to the Resident Evil series from the PlayStation 1 era, where you control the main character as they walk through the various pre-rendered 3D backgrounds, but I do assure you that there are no tank controls present. As Koudelka and her comrades take stock of their situation, they must always be on the lookout for abominations that may assault them from time to time in the form of a random encounter. Whilst I can hear some of you bemoan this feature, almost in sync with the gurgle of bile within the throat of the undead, it's actually pretty forgiving in that the encounters don't happen as often as they did in, say, Breath of Fire 2. The game tends to be fair in the number of battles that it places you into, and never really tended to interfere with my exploration of the monastery. Throughout the course of the adventure, Koudelka will need to collect items and use these to solve various puzzles that she encounters throughout the site. Many of the puzzles are item-based, however there are also a few that require you to gather some information to use later. However, unlike a typical adventure game that requires the player to memorize or write down this information, Koudelka will just provide it again when you encounter the puzzle, which for me felt like a little bit of unnecessary hand-holding. The only puzzle I ever got stuck on was one that was weight-based, and that was only because I didn't realize you could step on a scale in a previous room to find out Koudelka's weight. On that note, because the environments are generally dark, it can sometimes be difficult to locate where items are hiding in the different rooms. And if you don't manage to find the monastery map at the beginning of the game, well, good luck. The random encounters will draw Koudelka and her companions, Edward and James, into a smaller area set up in a grid formation, making the battle similar to a strategy RPG. Character and enemy turns are determined by their agility, where having a higher stat will allow a character to have multiple turns before the enemy can even have a chance to act. Characters can move, then attack, using their equipped weapon, change their weapon, or use magic or an item, or escape. Whatever action you take, besides moving, will cost you a turn. If you act before moving, you will be given a chance to move after the character has completed the action. It's to be noted that moving forward may seem like the most logical thing to do, but if a character is defeated and then a monster moves past them, then that character cannot be revived until after the battle, which sometimes makes the situation dire. Depending on what weapon type you attack with, or if you use a spell, you will gain experience toward and eventually level it up. The maximum level for every weapon proficiency and spell is 3, with higher weapon proficiency given the chance to attack multiple times in the one turn, or a spell affecting a wider area and doing more damage the higher level it is. It pays to use weapons and spells as much as possible due to this. However, one thing to be mindful of is that weapons can break and MP can run out, so you need to be careful in deciding how to use your resources. After all, this game does have most of the trappings of a survival horror. Like the whimsy of a fabled gypsy's life, the game can often be random in the items that it will present to you. Yes, the items and locations of those within the field are set, however weapons in particular have elemental attributes, which can change with each playthrough. One time you might pick up a water hammer, and the next time you pick up the same item it will be a fire hammer, for example. In addition to weapons, there are also armor and accessories that the characters can equip, though armor can generally only be found as a reward from a random encounter. I was lucky that I was able to find some good equipment for all my characters, but it was extremely rare that armor would drop over a weapon or healing item. I guess it keeps the game fresh and appealing for any subsequent playthrough, considering that there are a total of 3 endings to experience. During your adventure, you will want to save your progress. This can be accomplished in one of 2 ways. First, some rooms when you encounter them will have an S with a circle around it in the room's name. If you press the menu button when you see this message, you can make a temporary save, which will be overwritten if you choose to save via the same method again later. To make a permanent save, you need to first beat a boss at a designated spot, which will allow holy water to flow to that location. Wherever holy water is bubbling, you can make a permanent save. Making a save in this fashion will also restore all lost HP and MP, so it is worth it to seek these places out. Leveling up also restores any lost HP and MP, so sometimes it isn't worth conserving these resources. considering that you could be receiving free MP after the battle if the character does happen to gain a level. Speaking of leveling up, it happens quite more frequently than you'd expect, and each time you are given 4 attribute points to distribute as you like. One word of advice: don't balance your characters. Sometimes it is nice to be a jack of all trades, but in the case of Koudelka, not becoming a specialist could lead you to not being able to defeat certain enemies later in the game. Choose which of your characters will be spellcasters and which tanks, and stick with it. For my playthrough, I had Edward as a tank, and Koudelka and James as spellcasters, with James initially focusing more on healing and support. I didn't end up having many problems with any of the enemies because of this. When distributing your attribute points, it's worth noting that making some stats higher than others can create negative effects. Like if piety is too high, this does help in protecting against enemy spells, yes, but if an ally tries to use a healing spell on you, it will be ineffective. So in the least, make sure you balance this with intelligence, so not only are you dishing the damage, but your higher intelligence also makes healing spells effective. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that my favourite graphical style is the PS1 era pre-rendered 3D backgrounds. With Koudelka, we are once again graced with beautiful images that have been lovingly thought out so as not to make any of the rooms look empty, and to add atmosphere to them. Some areas can be dark, true, but I felt more than being a bother, it helped to establish the setting and made the place seem even more isolating as you wandered around, hoping to not encounter an enemy that would put its dismembered fist through your face. The CGI is nice, though the characters have a unique look to them with their big eyes and washed out faces, which persists through to the later Shadow Hearts games. It's a distinctive look that may not be for everyone, but I appreciated it. In terms of the audio, there isn't much music compared to other JRPGs, with most of it appearing in the cutscenes or in battle. Whilst in the field, you're mostly going to be greeted with the howling of the wind, crashing of the waves, footsteps, rattling chains, and occasionally an unsettling sound that you'd rather not have heard. The stellar part of this game for me in terms of audio was the voice acting, which is interesting considering the PS1 era JRPGs weren't typically known for this. Here, where sometimes the dialogue can be corny, the way that it's portrayed by the voice actors made it appealing to listen to. My favourite scene is one where just Koudelka and Edward are talking over a drink, and the voice actors made the characters sound drunk in a natural way, which really showed Koudelka dropping her mask.
She was gone the next morning. She left with practically everything in the room.
You don't have much luck with women, do you?
Well, you know what they say. The cleanest breakup is when a woman runs out on you.
What else is her statement?
I could really appreciate this and wish that more games would take note. My favourite music track is called Dead. It's a sad tune played on the violin which greatly captures the essence of Koudelka's character. While she does have a strong outward facade, deep down she is a hurt woman that is just looking for acceptance despite her powers. I had previously tried to play this game a while back and got nowhere because I didn't know what I was doing, so I'm glad that I decided to give it another go. Now that I understand how the game works, I can definitely recommend it. Standing in at around 10 hours, the dark and gruesome narrative steeped in the ethos of our own history will greet any player that decides to pick the game up. Whilst the characters can constantly be at odds with each other, and you may wonder why they don't just call it quits, if you stick it out, they may grow on you. If you haven't had the chance to play Koudelka, then I'd recommend you give it a try if you're a fan of the magical realism genre. It won't disappoint. By the way, I must thank Jess Bunty for providing some voiceover for this video. I really appreciate it. If you're interested in skincare, art, or Japan, you should definitely check her channel out. I've linked it in the description. This has been Venoir with a review of Koudelka for the Sony PlayStation. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe for more great JRPG content. As always, thanks for watching, take care of yourselves, and bye bye for now.